call the meeting to order, please. And with please, guys, pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Cook.
Here.
Bellissimo.
Present.
Cox.
Here.
Milszewski.
Here.
Readers.
Here.
Funkhauser.
Here.
Spears.
Present.
Teeling. Here. Quorum is established.
Any amendment to tonight's agenda? No presentations or public hearings. We have any citizen comments on items that are on the agenda this evening? I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Bellissimo.
Aye.
Milszewski.
Aye.
Spears.
Aye.
Readers.
Aye.
Funkhauser.
Nay.
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 Nay?
Nay.
Cook.
Aye.
Teeling.
Aye.
Cox.
Aye.
I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular city council meeting of January 27th, 2015 and February 10th, 2015 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Comments, questions, corrections on the minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please state aye.
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 Bills for payment this month, $974,063.51. Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve the mayor's appointment of Aaron McCall, J. Dickens, to the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee as a resident representative.
Second.
Comments or questions on this appointment? Roll call, please.
Spears. Spears.
Aye.
Bellissimo.
Aye.
Funkhauser.
Aye.
Milszewski.
Aye.
Teeling. Cook.
Aye.
Cox.
Aye.
Readers.
Aye.
Motion passes.
No committee reports under Park Board. I'll entertain a motion to reject all proposals pursuant to request for proposals for the operation of a food service business at 131 East Hydraulic Avenue, Unit C, Yorkville, Illinois.
So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions on this one? Yes, sir.
So what are we going to do?
I'm working on some options right now, but hoping for the second city council meeting in March, I'll have more concrete information to give you. And more concrete.
So we're no longer limiting it to food, correct? Or are we still?
Right now, if anybody, contacts us and they're throwing out a proposal, we're definitely listening to them, and we'll take it to the park board. Because 2 of the 3 in this one decided to send their offers, and the third person was already somewhat competing against what we already had down there. The park board recommended to reject these bids and then see if we can gather some new proposals from people.
So are we looking for new proposals, or are we looking for maybe alternative uses?
I think both.
Okay. So whatever it is, it's going to come before us.
It will come before you, I'm hoping by the second city council meeting in March.
Thank you.
Right now, you're going to be down there selling food.
I got a cotton candy machine.
Cotton candy. Yes, sir.
I believe at the last meeting, we opened it up to anything at that point, right? When we set the RFP last time. Anything. So we were able to.
Okay, roll call, please.
Cook.
Aye.
Cox.
Aye.
Readers.
Aye.
Spears.
Aye.
Bellissimo.
Aye.
Funkhauser.
Aye.
Milszewski.
Aye.
Teeling. Motion passes.
Okay, a couple items under Plan Commission. I'll entertain a motion to approve an ordinance approving a special use for a single-family apartment in a business building, 711 North Bridge Street, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute.
So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions? Roll call, please.
Cox.
Aye.
Readers.
Aye.
Spears.
Aye.
Bellissimo.
Aye.
Funkhauser.
Aye.
Milszewski.
Aye.
Teeling.
Aye.
Cook.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve an ordinance approving the rezoning to the A1 agricultural district of the property located at 2560 Cannonball Trail, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute.
So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions on this one? Roll call, please.
Peters.
Aye.
Spears.
Aye.
Colosimo.
Aye.
Umhauser.
Aye.
Oshowski.
Aye.
Teeling.
Aye.
Cook.
Aye.
Pop.
Aye.
Passes.
All right, no ZBA, no city council report, city clerk's report, and community and liaison report. A few of us did attend the legislative breakfast this morning with 11 state reps and senators there. Interesting discussion, mostly focused on Governor Wellner's proposal to reduce LGDF, or our share of the income tax, by 50%. So we'll see. I mean, it's a starting point. That was pretty much the common theme with all the legislatures. It's a starting point, and we'll see what happens. But as you all know, it would be devastating to us. About $800,000 in our budget with 50% reduction. Any other community liaison reports? Staff reports.
Just had a brief report on Game Farm Road. This morning, we had our construction conference with IDOT. Since it's a federally funded project, we had to have a meeting with them. And the contractor informed us of the initial schedule, all depending on weather. But next week, they're going to start setting up their traffic control, putting signs for what have you. The following week, the week of the 9th, they'll probably be doing tree removal. And then the week of the 16th, starting underground construction toward the route 4 end of the job. So we plan on having a more detailed meeting next week with Eric Back and the police department, fire department, school, and the contractor. Iron out a few more issues, but the plan is moving forward.
I'm excited. This space, he's all jacked up.
And just so you all know, something I did not realize is that the street will be closed down through traffic for periods of time. As they start phase 1, the north end of Game Farm will be closed. Any idea how long, Brad?
They have basically from now until school gets out, it's about mid-June at this point.
That's when, once they move to the southern section, that section will be closed off and people will have to access Game Farm from 34.
Is that going to be after schools are allowed from the summer?
The plan in front of the school is to do it while they're out. Yes, correct.
Yeah, I guess I really didn't realize it. I thought they would keep the lane open. I guess it was in the paper that it would be closed down completely, and I must not have read it, because I had someone come to me and tell me, they're closing it down completely? I said, no, we wouldn't do that. Evidently we are. So, just wanted to get that out there for everyone, so everyone's aware, in case people are calling and asking about it. Okay, lastly, we have our first,
I have one more community thing. The Kendall County Juvenile Justice Council and CASA Kendall County are doing a 5K walk run on April 18, 2015. The proceeds are being divided up between the Kendall County Juvenile Justice Council, which runs programs through the high schools throughout the entire county that serve the high school age students. And CASA Kendall County, as we all know, is the court-appointed special advocates who represent abused and neglected children in the court. It's a 5K run walk. It's $25 to run and participate. Sponsorships are available. To register, you go to getmeregistered.com/sky5k, and that's where you can sign up for the race. And if you want to sponsor the race, you can contact me or Brenda Corrales at the Kendall County State's Attorney's Office. So come on out. It's the first annual. They're hoping to make this an annual event to raise some money for the kids in the county. Thank you.
anyone else? Okay, Bart, all yours.
Okay. I was told I have to keep the budget presentation proportionate to the actual length of the meeting, which means I've got about 5 minutes here. Direct 375 slides.
He started out with 150 slides.
And without a clicker here, so that's a part
We
of
did cut it down.
my free roaming nature here. Okay. This is the fiscal year 16 budget presentation. We are going to do things a little bit differently this year in that we're going to actually, I'm going to do this presentation all tonight. Hopefully it won't take too long. Hold the public hearing on March 10th, and then we just have to make sure that we approve a budget, obviously by the end of April 30th, which is the end of our fiscal year. So this is everything on tonight's outline. We're going to talk about the big picture, the year-by-year overview, all the items to note in the budget memo, and then the small picture. So just a reminder, even though we do a 5-year budget, we only approve the first year, which is fiscal year 16, and everything else beyond that we just use the planning document. So how do things look in general? We've said the same thing kind of each year. You know, it's pretty good now, less so in the future. Just the one difference is this year. We've got the comparison here between the last year's budget presentation and then this year's budget presentation. You know, each year we've kind of said, well, you know, it's going to be bad 3-4 years from now. This is the first year really in the past few where that forecast hasn't remained 3 to 4 years in the future. So we're basically looking at some financial issues probably 2 to 3 years in the future. So, and then including some issues in the general fund really starting in fiscal year 17 after we approve this budget. So it's the first time really that, you know, we're forecasting this is kind of the last year of a moderate budget. And after that, it's 4 years in the general fund basically of deficits. So that means we have to figure out, you know, what to do should our conservative revenue projections not come to fruition. So how do things look in the general fund as a fund balance comparison? We've always kind of said that $3 million is where we like to be in the aggregate fund balance. So when you start to chip away on this over time and eventually hit negative fund balance in fiscal year 20, obviously again that's 5 years in the future, you know, we got to make some decisions between now and then. So here's our aggregate city budget from last year's budget compared to this year. So not really a whole lot of difference in fiscal year 16. We're still spending a lot of money compared to fiscal year 15 because, mainly because of Game Farm Road and Salmonock. We took in all the revenue last year from the bond proceeds, and now we're going to spend them down this year. So that's a good thing. But you know, there's not a whole bunch of rosy projections for fiscal year 16 from last year. A little bit of a better projection in fiscal year 17 compared to last year's budget, but really that's just as a result of some deferred capital. And then after that, our budget projection actually looks a little worse overall in 18, 19, and 20. So we got to make sure that we turn that around if the fiscal year 15 audit isn't correct. As a reminder too, on our aggregate city budget, we talked about this a little bit at the end of the memo. $3 million is kind of our threshold for having financial issues related to payroll or invoices. You know, that's where certain points of the year are going to be very thin. Obviously, when we get real estate taxes, it's a little bit easier. But you know, that line didn't move very much from fiscal year 18. We're still kind of predicting in the middle of fiscal year 18, approaching fiscal year 19 as having some significant issues if we do nothing between now and fiscal year 18. So again, that's 2-3 years off, so we still have time to make these decisions. Whereas, you know, a few years ago, we basically stumbled upon them, had to make some cuts, had some bond issues to deal with. So big picture again, general fund is above 15% through fiscal year 18. Again, that's not our standard anymore, it's 30%, so it is important that we monitor that each year. And then when you get to fiscal year 19, and that actually should be fiscal year 20, negative 2%, well, that's really when we got to make sure that each year incrementally that projection is getting better. So in the water fund, we'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but it fluctuates a little bit more wildly than it did last year, what we had planned. We implemented a graduated increase in water rates over 3 or 4 years last year. And what we saw was volume decreased by a significant amount from 2 years ago to this past year. We had a little bit of a cooler, wetter summer, so we saw the seasonal rates dip down, which is great from a long-term perspective, and we'll get into that. But from a short-term perspective, it resulted in a revenue shortfall in fiscal year 15, or it will, because we're currently in fiscal year 15. Sewer fund was right on schedule. We had a couple things With Route 47 that we'll get into that were a little bit higher than expected, but in general, we've got a healthy fund balance in the sewer fund, and we're drawing it down over time, which is great. And again, as a reminder, revenue growth, we either project very minimal revenue growth through the entire budget, or we don't predict any. And we also, this is a bit of a change from last year, in a 5-year budget, we do not have any personnel additions. Last year, we had a couple police officers, we had a Parks and Recreation employee, and then we had an administrative analyst in the admin department. Those are all gone from this year's budget as a result of trying to make sure that the fiscal year 17, 18, 19, 20 projections are a little bit better than they currently are now. But on the flip side, you'll see a massive increase in capital project funding, which is good, because we need to knock some of these things off our plate, stop pushing them off into the future where they get more expensive, and then fix some roads and sewers. So again, this is just kind of the pictorial description of our general fund. Over time, obviously we talked about fiscal year 17, we're starting to run major deficits basically through fiscal year 20. So we want to make sure that we correct that, by next year. In the water fund, this is what it looks like over time. Generally we're kind of above the fund balance negative threshold until we hit about fiscal year 19. So, obviously this steep drop off between fiscal year 14 and fiscal year 15 is cause for concern if it continues to happen year after year. We're not going to be able to afford, frankly, cash flow issues if the water fund continues to tank and if something happens to the sewer fund. So something to monitor. Sewer fund, again, we said this was healthy and this is fine. It is, but when you couple that with the water fund, that cash flow issue, and then the general fund, you can't have all three of those things that are cash rich currently all depleting at the same time. Otherwise, you will run into long-term financial issues. So we got to make sure that this drawdown, as planned, is stable over time. And then just as the aggregate city budget, obviously we talked a little bit about Game Farm and Salmodoc bond proceeds occurring between fiscal year 15, which is what we're currently in, and fiscal year 16. So that's acceptable. We sold bonds. We need to make sure that we complete the project. And then we need to make sure that we adjust our general fund deficits from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 20. So we've got an entire year basically to monitor revenue projections and then take action. And then make sure that we don't ever hit this fiscal distress point of about $3 million in total cash on hand sometime in fiscal year 18. So that's something that Rob and I do on a monthly basis when we look at admin budget reports. So just some long-term assumptions throughout the entire budget. We'll capitalize on these now, that way we don't have to talk about them in each year. We do have 3.25% in merit increases for staff in this current year. That matches the Public Works contract. We are currently under negotiations with the Fraternal Order of Police for both the officers and sergeants union. That contract ends April 30th of 2015, so their fiscal year 16 numbers are undetermined at this point. And then after that, we have modest increases built into the budget, so we're assuming that everybody gets a raise, but it can always be cut, obviously, at a later date. And then no new staff through fiscal year 20. We talked about the new police officers, but we'll get into it in items of note, and then an admin analyst in fiscal year 17. Health insurance, IMRF employer contribution rates, modest increases throughout the entire budget. Conservative budgeting principles, hopefully over time, will lead us to saving some money there. And then everybody always asks about commodity pricing. We have general graduated increases for each one of those. It's a little different. I think gasoline we had proposed 5 to 8%. Electricity was a little bit more volatile. Then office cleaning was a lower dollar amount. And other contractual services like that, we had assumed a smaller increase. Okay. So, but with all of that in the photos, for the general budget picture over the next 5 years, you have some pretty major initiatives, and a lot of them are really focused in fiscal year 16 and 17. Everything from Game Farm Road to some grant-funded projects like the Wrigley intersection improvements. And these are all in the budget narrative memo too, so I'm not going to repeat all of them, obviously. The comprehensive water study that we talked about as part of the city council goals. So well 8 rehabilitation, which is new. We'll talk about that when we get into the water fund. Park improvements. You've got fiscal year 17, you've got Road to Better Roads continuing to be funded, although we'll get into the actual selection of the streets later, obviously. Kennedy Road multi-use path, which is being funded for state grants. And then 18, you've got kind of the same thing. You've got mainly state projects, Route 34, Route 71, that are going to be expanded. and our commitments that we've already made being funded in the budget. Then after that, in fiscal year 19 and 20, it's really bare bones as far as capital projects go. So all of our unfunded project lists, which we'll get to in a few minutes as well, none of those are addressed in a 5-year budget. So, each year when it feels like I'm coming back to you and saying, okay, this year we're going to knock off Countryside from the unfunded project list, and it costs $3 per month basically on everybody's water bill to do it, that's something that we're doing incrementally rather than just saying, well, we're going to pay for all $50 million worth of infrastructure at once, and here's what it's going to cost. So then just again, this is the general snapshot of the overall city budget as we progress into the actual discussion of the items to note, and then the small picture. So first item, we talked about it a little bit here a few minutes ago. A couple of the aldermen, Mayor and I had attended the legislative breakfast this morning. The actual proposal is to cut LGDF by 50%. It's a big deal for us. We've fought against it in the past. Governors have tried to do it in the past. We've heard that it's a negotiation starting point and that the Democrats opposed it in general and that the Republicans, we've heard rumors that, they're actually targeting 25% is what we're hearing. So even that's $400,000 a year. That'd be a significant cut to our budget. As it relates to this specific budget proposal, we don't address it. The state's budget discussion are going to take months, might not be settled until June or July. Even if they were to implement it, it would give us months, because we have a healthy fund balance currently, in order to be able to retroactively address it. Additionally, too, since it's been proposed before, I'm optimistic that the municipalities are going to be able to defeat the proposal. It's something that they're going to have to work for, but I think we talked about it before the meeting. There's 7,600 municipal governments or local governments in Illinois. It's the most amount of local governments of any state in the nation by far. It's a pretty significant lobbying group. So, when you talk about throwing something out that really is just a cost shift, you're not really solving the problem. You're just saying, here, municipalities, you have to handle it. It gives me a little bit of optimism that, they're probably going to see that eventually and realize that it's not worth the fight. So, we'll see. Excuse me. Capital budget comparison, I talked about this a little bit with the inclusion of the Countryside infrastructure project and Game Farm. You've seen significant capital budget investment from last year to this current year. So that's a good thing. And it provides you an opportunity to defer some of those if you run into a cash issue at the time. So Road to Better Roads, we've planned this out each year. We do have this budgeted the same amount that we did last year. We do have a fiscal year 16 plan, so that's summer of 2015 that EEI is already engineering and drawing. We're moving forward with it. Similar to last year, we'll go out for alternative bids above and beyond what we've already approved, the hopes that the bids will come back favorable and that we'll then get to add some on. And then fiscal year 17 through 20, we kind of had a general outline a couple years ago of which streets we wanted to do. But the idea is that EEI and the public works staff are going to go through, take a look at the roads that we've already done, see how they've held up over time without having to do the whole laser survey of the roadways, and make some recommendations at least for the next couple years before we look at updating it again a few years from now. Unfunded capital projects, the lists are on here. It's everything from streets department to the Beecher Center is on there. We talked about that last year as part of the park grant. So a whole bunch of water main replacements, intersection improvements, water and sewer recapture. So you've got development obligations on there. Quiet zones, we talked about that at Public Works. Mill road improvements, which is in the Grand Reserve Annexation Agreement. So a lot of things, multi-million dollars worth of things that we need to keep on our radar screen and figure out which ones are important and which ones can be done. Economic development is the next one. This is kind of the first major policy decision that we have. The YEDC director has notified us that she's retiring next year, 2016. So as part of that, and because membership is down, the YEDC board is going to be coming back to us and asking for additional funds for this current year. So everybody that's on the board right now that is paid has already seen an increase in their dues from $5,000 to $6,000. So they've made a higher investment in the YEDC. And so that's why they think that they should be able to come to us and ask for us for a higher investment too. So we've budgeted for it, knowing that City Council still has to make the decision here over the next year or two, so that it gives you flexibility to make that decision. Whether it's in-house or at the YEDC or some other economic development method that I haven't thought of yet, we want to make sure that we have the funds in the budget. That way you can make the decision that you want to. So I think it's at $76,000 in this upcoming year. So, and there are a couple different choices. You know, we talked about hiring an in-house staff person. Oswego's done that. I think their net economic development costs end up being in the the low six figures. So still more expensive than what we're paying now, but it has its benefits. We have more control over the person, obviously. There are some cons, then they're subject to FOIA. You can't really have confidential, truly confidential conversations with the business entity that's coming in. Or you can just shift the economic development responsibilities in-house. So a couple different options there that, as the budget progresses and then when we actually get into the policy implications, it's a pretty detailed debate. Police officers, I talked about this. This is our number one goal 2 years ago, to hire police officers. Our goal is to hit 32 sworn officers. We're at 30. We're going to hire the final 2 in fiscal year 16. Basically put us over the edge for regional averages. And then also go to 4 patrols citywide, which would be good. But just because of the instability of the long-term financial picture, we are recommending to hold off on that, to readdress it basically at the end of the fiscal year 15 audit, which should be about October. And that'll give us a better idea if we're in a good enough position to be able to add 2 new police officers. Countryside is probably the biggest conversation we'll have this year. There's a whole detailed discussion throughout the budget. It's a couple different sections. You've got about $8 million worth of roads and water main that need to be totally replaced in that subdivision. The roads are some of the worst in the entire city, and we'll get into that probably at Public Works at some point or another. The water mains had a breakage average, we talked about at the city council goals, of 4 times what's considered acceptable by the industry for water main breaks. So you're seeing a significant amount of water main breaks in the area, which is resulting in some minor and moderate service disruptions. We haven't had any major issues out there with boil orders or anything recently. But it is something that it needs to be addressed sooner or later if we're going to have a modern water system. So the specific recommendations of all of that $8 million worth of funds is still under review. And the way that breaks down is we talked about game farm coming in under budget with the bids. So we've got about $1.4 million to play with there. Has to be used on roads, so you throw that all on roads. The water main costs are significantly more expensive. Remember, they're $5.5 million compared to $2.2 million for the roads. So, you try to get as much done as you can underneath those $1.4 million of roads, and that leads you to about $4.25 million worth of water infrastructure that can be done. So, in the budget, we've actually proposed to do that. We've proposed to issue a bond of about $4.25 million, complete 75% of the water mains and roads in the countryside subdivision, and then pay for that over time in the water fund through a $3 increase in the water infrastructure fee. So without doing it, there's not really a way long-term that you can fund those things. So it is kind of like an all or nothing proposition, at least as far as funding the countryside infrastructure goes. There aren't enough staff there. There aren't enough capital projects that you can defer. There aren't enough operational savings that can be done to offset that cost. So it is a significant conversation. And then that leads to the water fund. Again, we've got our schedule on the board here from what was approved last year. We talked about the lower usage volumes. That results in a revenue shortfall. So we've actually got about $170,000 short in the current fiscal year because we had a cold, wet summer and volumes were suppressed. So it's great because then we're pushing off our capital investments way into the future, which is good news. But that means then you have short-term deficits, and you have to offset that almost with an immediate revenue or rate increase the following year to make sure that you're running your enterprise fund appropriately. So, the fund we had already kind of talked about was one of those that we were kind of stringing along because there was so much capital investment that needed to happen with Route 71, water main relocation, and then countryside and some of the other things. So when you add this on top of it, it just doesn't make for a good financial picture. So the plan, basically to make up that lost revenue, we are recommending that you stop the build program. We do think that it worked the first year. We saw a lower percentage of people using the build program over people who were just going to build a house and not use the build program. That in the second year, because I think we issued 6 normal building permits and 77 build permits. So, take that conversation aside. Clearly, people are looking at it, homeowners, and are saying, it's a better deal for me to go for the build permit, so I'm going to put up the $5,000 myself, and that way I get $5,000 back from the city. And so it becomes really an either-or proposition after the homeowner has already decided to come here. So, the flip side of that would be if you believe that it really is working, that we would have only issued, 6, maybe 15, 20 of residential building permits last year. We did 60 the year before. So to me, it makes sense that people are just seeing it as a better deal and are choosing it. So if we cut it out completely when it ends in June of 2015, we're hoping to gain about $70,000 in additional revenue. That makes some assumptions based on water connection fees, which are different between subdivision, and then it also assumes that we're going to get about 65 new homes in the city still. I think we had 83 last year. So hopefully we won't see really any decrease in new housing starts as a result of this, but we'll see. Second would be to set the monthly water infrastructure fee back to $8.25. So it used to be $8.25, so that's $16.50 monthly. Then we decreased it to $4 when we implemented the road infrastructure fee. So of that $4.25 monthly increase, $1.25 is related to the revenue shortfall, so that gives us some additional money, and then $3 would be related to offset the actual cost of the Countryside water main project. So if you don't want to do Countryside for whatever reason, you can scratch that $3 off, and the water fund will still be relatively okay. So again, it's a bi-monthly amount of $16.50 per user. So then additionally, on top of that, we would recommend that you increase the base rate bi-monthly from $15 to $16 in the upcoming fiscal year. So that's a 50-cent increase per month. Rather than adjust the actual volume rate calculations per 100 cubic foot, we decided that it was safer and more stable, obviously, to go with the flat fee. And so that way, people aren't paying a whole lot of money. It doesn't hit your industrial users as hard. Then there's also a stable revenue source for the city. Some other items throughout the budget. IMET lost on investment. We talked about this at admin committee a little bit. We had invested with a cooperative of municipal governments that put their money in securities. There was some fraud in the actual IMET investment profile to the tune of about $320,000 for the city. So total fraud was, I believe, $50 million spread between all the different municipalities. So they restricted 2.8% of our total investment at the time, which is $320,000. It's just sitting out there. We can't withdraw it. And so we've recommended that we actually write that off in the current fiscal year. So that has a little bit of an impact on the general fund. It's an MFT, water, sewer. It's in a couple other different funds. So it's spread out between the entire budget. But when you see loss on investment, that's what that means. As we get reimbursements back over time, we'll code that to the appropriate department. And we do think that there will be a significant reimbursement, if not, IMET keeps telling us that they think it'll be a full reimbursement over time. They've already seized, I think, $150 or $200 million worth of assets from the person who's alleged to commit the fraud. So it is something we're monitoring, and we've pulled all of our money out of IMET, obviously, and it's something that hopefully over time we get reimbursement on. Property taxes, we talked about this as part of the audit process, part of the city council goals process. This is the same schedule really that we've had in place for the past 4 or 5 years. A reduction of property taxes in aggregate between the city and the library line items on your budget. So not just the city, library included, through fiscal year 18, and then some modest inflationary increases tentatively planned for fiscal year 19 and 20. Again, those aren't set in stone until you actually vote on them each year. City council goals, I'll just kind of touch on the things that we've actually implemented as part of this budget process. Let's see, the downtown planning and development, we've got the ITEP streetlight project is in there. That would satisfy a portion of that. And then we also know that the businesses in the area are going to be forming a downtown business group. So no cost to us, but we want to make sure that we're a part of that, whether it's elected officials or staff members that's interacting with businesses. So there is a formal proposal, obviously, for countryside infrastructure in this budget. And then vehicle replacement, we've talked for years about making sure that the squad cars are up to date and that we're not wasting money on maintenance. Rob and I are actually going to be discussing the creation of a vehicle and equipment replacement fund. So it basically takes your vehicle and equipment fund budget and puts it on steroids. You've got replacement costs that are actually molded into the budget, and then it becomes an automatic process of when you need to buy a police car, when does it make sense to do so. So it becomes more automatic than that. Staffing, again, we took every staffing proposal out, including ones that were supported by individual department heads that we talked about, city council goals. We didn't think we could afford any of those, so we took them out. Capital infrastructure, we just got to keep talking about those things in the different funds. The road study, we're going to be doing that in-house, so there will be a little bit of cost with EEI, just in man hours, but we're not going to do a full refresh. We didn't propose anything for the municipal facilities master plan. We could have went through and did an entire RFP. We chose not to. And then we've got some other goals that we're just working towards in fiscal year 16 and 17 in the case of the comprehensive plan update. And then the school intergovernmental agreement should be in front of the city council here in the next month or so. So bond ratings and refinancing, we are going to be, if we approve the countryside infrastructure plan, that would be an issuance of about $4 million. And then additionally, we expect Kendall Marketplace to be in front of us here in the next few months, hopefully with our financing proposal for their existing development. So, cost analysis is the exact same slide from the audit presentation. So we still are recommending that engineering be done in-house. And then that brings us really to our small picture. And again, this is a repeat of a previous slide, just to make sure as we're going through all these individual decisions on line items, personnel requests, that when we get to about $3 million in fiscal year 18, we're back really where we were in fiscal year 8, 9, and 10 when we were looking at some cash flow issues. So we don't want to get there. Property taxes, corporate levy, the exact same plan that I just iterated on the items of note. There are different line items throughout the budget. You have to add those together if you want to get to your 2% decrease or 1% decrease. Police pension. We've been making a lot of progress on that in past years. We actually levied an amount higher than our actuarially recommended contribution last year. So we paid down our net pension obligation, which is great. So that means we're hopefully not going to be in a situation like the state is, at least just in regards to pensions anytime in the near future. Modest growth in municipal sales tax, and that's both non-home rule and regular. No growth in amusement taxes, no growth in state income tax for the reasons we talked about under the state's budget proposal. Building permits, just as a reminder, you'll see two line items, one in your general fund revenues, the other in your citywide capital fund. General fund revenues only offsets your operating budget, so that way we never get into a situation where we're booking $3 million worth of development funds, using it on operations, and then when the recession happens again next time, that we're then out of luck for about $3 million. So we want to make sure that those are going to one-time revenues, and that's what we're doing. Just through the individual funds on the expense side, we did budget for an entire year of the city treasurer, assuming the election occurs either way. We've got the auditor's contract in there through its existing term. We talked about no new police officers in the police department. We've got vehicle chargeback is still going to be in the streets department, parks and rec department, and then the police department. And that's the amount above and beyond whatever we're collecting for capital impact fees versus what we're actually paying out for police cars. Community development, we still got, we did put in an ongoing recruitment contract with the retail coach. We wouldn't recommend that it ever be extended beyond 1 year, but the thought is that if they get done with their recruitment efforts this year and it becomes a business decision for us, where they brought in more than $10,000 to the city, that it would make sense to continue to do that until they are fruitful. Then we've got the economic development line item, which we talked about. No change in mosquito control. We won't think about that really until the spring, which is hopefully next week. And then tree and stump removal, hanging baskets being re-implemented a year and a half from now. And then garbage services are in there as we'd exactly approved it last year. The admin services side, the KenCom projections are conservative still, so we hope that they'll be high. This is the first year where we actually paid out an actual invoice based on the full amount of our agreement, and it was $75,000, I think, and we had budgeted $150,000, so we ratcheted down all those future years projections based on that new lower number. So hopefully we never go beyond, I think we budgeted 15% increases, but who knows. IT services and engineering, we still recommend to be outsourced, especially with IT services. I think we spent $30,000 last year on actual man hours for equipment there. So it doesn't yet necessitate an expansion to go in-house. SSA funds, we're still completing both the projects we had approved last year. You already approved the 2014 levy amounts, so those are hopefully old news. MFT, same plan as last year. We want to draw down that fund balance over a 5-year period to get to zero eventually, and state keeps throwing high growth disbursements at us. We'll gladly accept them. However, the 5 disbursements that they started giving us about 4 to 5 years ago, we did receive the last one this past year. So, for the most part, MFT should be relatively stable. I know that there's been some discussion about raising the motor fuel tax at the state legislature, at least rumors of it. I can't imagine, given what the state is going through right now, that they're going to give us any extra revenue if they manage to increase it, or whatever that's worth. We'll see. Baseline Ridge Road Bridge, is another conversation we need to have probably at Public Works. We did budget for this last year, about $50,000 to $75,000. Our estimate just came back here in the past few weeks. It's $160,000 to actually repair the bridge. We finished the laser scan of it. But then on top of that, if you keep the entire roadway open, we probably need to do something to the actual roadway west of the bridge. So that's another $550,000. So the alternative is actually to close the road, similar to what we did with River Road Bridge. And that'd be about $50,000 to do it appropriately. And then the traffic counts, just in case you were curious, on Baseline are about 1/3 of what they were on River Road. So it's on the edge of our town, like River Road was, significantly less used, and there's only a couple homes on that street. So we think there are enough alternatives in the immediate area that it's viable. Whether the city council actually wants to do it is a different story. We'll talk about that later. Citywide capital fund, you'll see a whole bunch of offsetting revenue and expense items for settlement amounts, for grant projects. We do have the road infrastructure fee in the budget through the end of the 5-year proposal. A couple of different property maintenance line items in City Hall, painting, new carpet. We were planning on doing in fiscal year 15, we just hadn't got around to it this year. So we are proposing basically to push that into fiscal year 16. Our capital projects we've already talked about, state and local related. And then additionally, this is where you'll see an actual expenditure for countryside road improvements, and then the game farm bond repayment, which is something we issued last year, obviously. So first year debt service payments, unfortunately. Vehicle and equipment, we've got different capital needs in each of the departments. I won't read off all those, but they're all in the budget memo and on the slide there. And then additionally, we did want to do a used small paver in the parks and the street department that would allow us to do parking lots in-house, some trails as they come up. And so in accordance with that, if we get that approved, we would have a line item for trail improvements, which will allow us to install a couple new trails maybe, and then to actually have the materials for the actual parking lot resurfacing. So that's something we can get into if you're interested. Recreation utility van, some proceeds left over from rain-free park developments. Debt service fund, there's only one payment in there. That's basically from an old bond that we refinanced this past year. This is the one, though, the remaining one that's on the non-abated property taxes, which goes away in fiscal year 19 in accordance with our property tax reduction plan. Water fund, we talked a little bit about. We've got water sales being less than expected. We've got the rehash there of the water infrastructure fee breakdown of what it needs to go to in order to do countryside and offset the revenue shortfall. And then again, that assumes 65 new housing starts. We've got the comprehensive water system study in there that we talked about as part of the city council goals. Then we've got some different well rehabilitations over the next few years. I'm sure Brad will be happy to get into those either at the public hearing or the first meeting that you're discussing it, or tonight if you really want to. But you should be rehabilitating your wells every 7 to 10 years. For those that have been on the council for a few years, you may have remembered a couple years ago we actually had a well break apart, fell to the bottom of the well. Cost us, I think, $110,000 in emergency repairs at the time. So for the cost of a normal repair, we don't have basically the service issue every few years, and then we're not worrying about water pressure and water volumes across town. So something that needs to be done and hopefully should save us some money and a lot of effort, over time. Route 71 is in there, Countryside is in there, we talked about those. Sewer fund, again, we approved a 4-year rate schedule last year, so that carries you through fiscal year 19 to, less than $1 per month, or bi-monthly each year. And then we are recommending that the sewer infrastructure fee remain in place through fiscal year 20. So you'll also see in there, and I got into it a little bit, it's a little bit, not premature, but it is very early. YBSD has expressed some interest in funding some I&I improvements to our sewer system within our Road to Better Roads program. So the idea being is that they've got 2 metrics for capacity, and I forget which one is which. One of them is acceptable, it's at like 53% at their current plant. The other one is at 80. And what we're going to see is that if they don't do improvements over time, that we may eventually get to a point where the IEPA steps in and says, you can't issue new building permits, or maybe a new plant expansion can't happen. So they're in the process of determining their own timelines for plant expansion, and one of those components is going to be coming to us and saying, we want to throw some money at you basically to improve infiltration in your sewer system. That way our capacity will actually go up in the interim. So it's low-hanging fruit for them. We're putting together an actual formal proposal for them that you'll get, that Public Works will review, and then we'll get sent to them, and hopefully they approve here in the next month or two. Some more offsetting line improvements in land cash funds related to grants. And then Parks and Recreation Fund, we did have some higher enrollments in child development, which is preschool, so that's extra revenue for Parks and Recreation. They've been doing a pretty good job over the past few years of actually exceeding their budget expectations. So they've come out with a pretty healthy fund balance each year. Excuse me. And then we did also on the revenue side there have some decreases in rental income due to the reductions that we just did. So Hometown Days is the last thing. It's the major thing on the expense side. We've seen weather issues each year, so we're expecting good weather for Hometown Days this year. Law of averages says that we've got to hit one here in the past 5 years. Each year we haven't lost any money, but we have budgeted for about a $20,000 or $30,000 profit margin on Hometown Days. So that's a lost opportunity for us when we get rained out. So we're budgeting for it to happen this year. On the TIF funds, we would expect to see the first full year of property taxes for NCG and then Lighthouse in fiscal year 16 and 17, which is going to give us almost an entire bond payment for the first 4 years in the intermediate. If you recall, the debt service schedule that we approved was a lower dollar amount for the next 4 to 5 years, and then it ramped up when hopefully more of these businesses are in place. So everything past Lighthouse, once we get a couple more businesses, whether it's a strip mall or a significant anchor tenant, is going to be above and beyond what we currently have, will allow us to pay our debt service, and then hopefully it might even allow us to close out the TIF early. So we really got to focus on getting a couple extra businesses in those outlots. In the downtown, we didn't really put much money in there for actual TIF payouts to either Imperial Investments or Rowdy's is in there, but they're in breach and a couple of the other ones that we've approved. So that'll all be incremental as the actual TIF property values raise. We'll be paying them more money, so it'll be offsetting, won't be much of a net impact to the budget. So we've got some other things in there related to the streetlight project, and then just things that happen downtown to city buildings that we can fund through the TIF. So that was it. I don't know what my time was. I don't know if Chris was timing. Probably a little longer. Anyway, that was the only one, thankfully. So March 10th will be our public hearing. We've already issued the notice on that. And then that gives you basically 3 full and clear meetings to discuss this before approval at the either April 14th or April 28th City Council meetings. So with that, just for anybody that's listening at home or anybody in the crowd, the entire budget proposal in spreadsheet, Word document, and PDF format is available on the city website. It's been up for the past week or so. So if you ever have insomnia at 2 a.m., you can download that and do what Rob and I do during the day for fun. That's it. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Bart, just a quick question. On the proposal to discontinue the build program, does that include the newest spec and model homes?
It does not. No. We would propose to keep, what do we call it, the SHIP? Renew. Okay. We had a couple different names we were calling it. The Renew program is model homes. We are proposing to continue that. We haven't had anybody use it yet. And I think the way it's set up, it's less prone to potential strategy.
What is our, I know our cap on fee ranges from subdivision to subdivision. What is, on average, our tap-on fees?
Maybe about $3,000. On the high end, it's $3,700, which is what you've got approved by ordinances. Some of the subdivisions that are still building were platted in the 90s, and those are anywhere from $0 to, $800. So it just depends on the subdivision.
All right, any other quick questions? If not, we will be talking about this for the next month or so. Okay, any additional business? I did have one quick item I brought up at admin last week. When I was out at Public Works and talking to some of the guys out there, it became evident that we have some problems with our electronics recycling program. We started out as a great idea and a great service to residents, kind of became a victim of its own success, I guess you could say. They were getting so much electronic scrap in there, and we just have nowhere to put it. Before it just cost us a little bit of storage space and man hours, but now it's, no other communities are taking scrap like this, so we're getting people from all over the place dumping stuff. We're getting businesses that are stripping out all the good components and just dropping shelves there. We're actually having people come in the middle of the night, pick up stuff that's been dropped off, strip it out, and then re-drop it off. So the company we were using no longer takes this scrap for free because all the good components are missing. So now they charge us. It costs us money, and it's just become a real hassle. So we're gonna have to seriously look at some other alternatives, whether it's a discontinuation of the program, or maybe we work with, there's a Chamber of Commerce still has a green committee.
Yes.
Maybe work something out where we do a quarterly thing at one of the parks where people can come and drop stuff off. So I just want to give everyone a heads up that there needs some changes to that program. It'd be nice to keep offering the service, but it's just not feasible. I kind of look at it the same way I look at prescription drugs. I mean, we're not issuing the drugs, we shouldn't be collecting them. We don't sell TVs, there's really no reason that's part of our core mission to collect them. There's other alternatives for people out there. So, just want to give everyone a heads up. If anyone has any other ideas, let us know. That's all I had. Anything else under additional business? No executive session. Do we have any citizen comments? Ron, anything to say? Seaver? Anything to say?
No.
Announce you came to see.
I have a mouthful of stitches from surgery.
Oh, okay. Meeting adjourned.